Good afternoon, this is Peter Towers from ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome to this webinar on ESS BIZGRANTS. Today, I hope you're having a wonderful day. There's still some people logging on, and we will be underway in a couple of minutes. In a minute, I mean. Looks like most people are there, so welcome. If you have any questions during the webinar, can you please type your question in and raise your hand. What I'm showing you at present is the home page of ESS BIZGRANTS. We're very happy to have a testimonial from David Smith, a former president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Australia. David Smith said this is a tool that should reside in every accountant's office. Few accountants are aware of the grants available to their clients. It's a minefield of federal, state, local, special purpose grants that seem to change almost daily. I can assure you that is the case. ESS BIZGRANTS has done the hard work in bringing together all this information in an easy-to-use application. If an accountant wants to make a client happy, get them some government money. ESS BIZGRANTS is the tool that can quickly help accountants quickly assess whether a client might be able to gain a grant. David Smith, Director of Smith Inc. 2020 Proprietary Limited and a former president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. So welcome to this webinar today. What we're showing you at present is the home page area, so it has a fair bit of information there as to how ESS BIZGRANTS operates. You can apply for a free trial for 14 days to trial one or two of your clients, and all you have to do is to go onto this site and click on Start Free Trial, and the system will ask you for some information so that a password and user code can be allocated to you, and you are then able to get started on a free 2-week no obligation trial on using ESS BIZGRANTS. We promoted this webinar today with particular information on the Industry Skills Fund and the Training for Employment Scholarship. So I'm going to go through and have a look at both of those new grants first in this webinar today, and then we will go back onto the ESS BIZGRANTS site, and I will give you an overview of how the system operates and how it can assist accountants and advisors to be very proactive in dealing with your clients. It's interesting to note one of David Smith's big reasons for supporting ESS BIZGRANTS, and that was he found that when he was undertaking some due diligence reviews for one of the accounting consolidators, that when he talked to the clients of the accountants who had indicated they were interested in being considered, that the clients indicated to him that one of their real problems with their accountants related to not being kept informed of government grants. And their biggest complaint was when the only way they found out about a grant was when they heard that one of their competitors had been awarded a grant. Interesting comments from David Smith for you to think about. How many of your clients are receiving government grants? The total pool's worth about $5 billion per annum. Each and every one of us are paying towards that pool of grants. Are your clients receiving their fair share? So we're going to look at the new grant, the Industry Skills Fund. There's $476 million being applied, and there's going to be 200,000 training places over the next 4 years. It's important to remember that applicants must financially contribute. So this is not a fully funded grant. There are various percentages that are available. It primarily targets small businesses, including micro businesses. There's not many grants around at present for very small businesses, under 4 full-time equivalent employees seems to be the general definition for micro. So the fund can assist in skills advice, which is administered by consultants that have been engaged by the government to handle this program, and in straight out training grants, which is what I suspect most of you are interested in. Now, this grant is primarily targeted at the government's priority industries, but it is not exclusively targeted at these industries. The government, in their wisdom, has nominated priority industries as being food and agribusiness, mining equipment, medical technologies and pharmaceuticals. Now, this is the manufacturer of these items, not retail. Advanced manufacturing, and then enabling technology and service industries that support one or more of the priority industries. And those enabling technology industries included information technology, freight and transport, and some professional services, but primarily related to scientific professional services. Applicants in the priority industries will be fast-tracked. There's no debate about that. That's what happens. But applicants that don't fall within the priority industries are still able to apply. So if your client has got a good case as to why they need skills development and how the client is then able to use that skills development within their business, it's worth applying. So the skills advice is targeted at small, medium enterprises who need help identifying their skills need. An example I'd give you is this program will not fund typing courses in an office or general trades training. It's new skills, skills that the business can then use to earn additional income. And these skills must be delivered by experienced advisors. And the advice needs to be tailored to suit the applicant's business requirements. So this is not mass-produced training. It's training for skills development that is very much targeted at the business's requirements. So recommendations for improvement will be given in the following categories: business growth training and growth training support services. So there's some categories within the training activities that people can look at. Now, who pays for this? The co-contribution, a micro business which is under 4 full-time equivalent employees, so working 38 hours per week for the whole year except annual leave. The contribution by the business is 25%, or in other words, the grant is 75% of the cost. There is no specific cost mentioned in this whole program. It is the contribution levels that is what is stated, because the cost is going to be determined on the skills requirement for an individual business. A small business up to 19 full-time equivalent employees has to contribute 34%, or in other words, they receive a grant of 66%. Businesses up to 199 employees, it's a 50% grant. And large businesses, which are 200 plus will receive a grant of 25%. So they've obviously got to contribute 75%. Now the employer's contribution must be in cash. It's not in kind on any basis. Who can apply? Registered training organisations and other training deliverers are not eligible to apply. So the application must be made by the individual business whose team are going to receive the skills training. And any individual businesses currently undertaking an industry skills fund project are not eligible to apply, and individuals are not eligible to apply. The eligibility rules: the business must be solvent. A trust can apply. It's interesting that a few more of the government grants every year are expanding eligibility requirements to include trusts, and that's great. A few years ago that wasn't the case. It was very difficult to get a trust into the grant program. The business has to have an ABM and it has to be registered for GST, and it has to have traded for the last 3 years. So it has to be lodging business activity statements, and it can't be named in the Workplace Gender Equality Agency reports. I'm just going through PowerPoint slides that are part of the ESS BIZTOOLS material on this grant and picking out some key points for you in this webinar. Now, the other key criteria that has to be looked at is the person who is going to be trained or to develop these skills. They can't have previously completed a training course that's for a similar project for someone else. They have to be an Australian resident or a New Zealand passport holder who's worked in Australia for at least 6 months. They need to be of legal working age, and they've got to satisfy any of the requirements that might be necessary for this program. So how do you go about getting a client into this program? You can call the single business service number on 13 28 46 or go to the government website. They have engaged contractors, private enterprise people who are supporting this program around Australia. They're in the capital cities, of course, and they're in the major regional areas. There are people employed to coordinate this program. So you will, as an accountant, advisor, helping your clients, you could contact them, and their details are available on the government's website, and they will then take you through and be able to advise you on your client's eligibility for this grant. The next one I'm going to talk to you about is the Training for Employment Scholarship. This is a new program that commenced in March and is running for 12 months. It's available in a number of regional and outer metropolitan areas. Now the locations, and we've got full details of these within ESS BIZTOOLS, are New South Wales Central Coast, New South Wales Hunter Valley excluding Newcastle, and New South Wales the outer western areas and the Blue Mountains. So they're the areas eligible. In Queensland it's Ipswich, Sunshine Coast and Townsville. In Victoria it's Melbourne West and the Mornington Peninsula. In South Australia it's Adelaide North, and in Western Australia it's Perth Southwest. So they're the areas that are covered by this grant, and there's also Tasmania at Launceston East. The grant funding is up for 26 weeks of specific job training. So this is not as deliberate in skills development as the previous grant, but it's on general job-specific training for a new person. The employer can get reimbursement of expenses of up to $7,500, including GST. That's not the way government grants are normally worded. They normally state the amount plus GST, but this one's included GST. And obviously there's a funding agreement that has to be signed. And this grant is targeted at businesses with under 200 full-time equivalent employees. So if your business is located, or you have clients more particularly, with businesses located in any of those areas that I mentioned before, and that's a fairly substantial part of Australia, then it'd be worth looking at whether they wish to avail themselves of these training schemes to help employees. Now, eligibility, the business has to be solvent, have an ABN, employ less than 200, and obviously be located in one of the target regions, and employs one or more eligible participants. So that does mean that a business might have 3 or 4 people going through this training program and receiving $7,500, including GST for each of those persons. And the new employee has to be employed for at least 25 hours per week within 3 months. Are not eligible to apply individual trusts, except if they've got corporate trustees. Registered training organisations can't apply. Group training organisations can't apply. I'm just having a problem with my PowerPoint slides there, so I'll go into the full screenshots. Participation in the training, it's for persons aged 18 to 24 years. Obviously, there's a very large number of people in that age bracket that are unemployed. They have to be Australian citizens. They're going to be employed by the business, and the individual's also going to agree that they're going to participate in this training, and they haven't been in full-time employment or full-time study prior to commencing employment by the business. Some clients will have problems with that one, I suggest, but that's the rules, and we just need to remember that. So the eligible training is going to be accredited training. It could be non-accredited as long as it meets with the eligibility requirements when the application is submitted. Now, non-eligible expenditure is training provided to or by a business or related party to their own employees. So this whole program is targeted at businesses employing external people who can bring new ideas and skills into the business. On-the-job training doesn't apply, and training has to be conducted in a period not exceeding 26 weeks. Non-eligible expenditure, well, there's a list there of what is non-eligible. An application, the application can be submitted. The application must be submitted within 3 months of hiring the new employee. And when you submit a quote, or your client submits an application, they need to supply the quote from the training provider. Now, that's how that scheme works. If you like, we're happy to supply you with a paper which we've produced on the Training for Employment Scholarship, and also the Industry Skills Fund. Please just send us an email at the conclusion of the webinar, and we'll be happy to send those papers to you, which will give you a better overview of how this particular program operates. So what I'm going to do now is go back to the ESS BIZGRANTS website. That was the the discussion we had on those two new grant programs. We will continue to do that at each of these monthly webinars, which we have for people who might be interested in ESS BIZGRANTS. Incidentally, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them into your computer and raise your hands, and we will get an answer to you later in the webinar. I will make a comment, or if it's a bit complicated, we will send you an email. I've now got on to the members home area within the ESS BIZGRANTS website. And you've got a summary there of how the system operates, but we're going to now go direct into the site, and we'll go to a client profile. We'll create a new profile, and there are some basic questions that have to be answered. So I thought we would get started. I'm going to call this business, hopefully a fictitious business, Ipswich Steel Fabricating. If there is such a business, our apologies, doesn't relate to them. You could insert a code or a number there if you wish, because we are using cloud technology. You then have to identify the corporate structure that the business operates under. This is very important because most of these government grants are specifying the type of entity that they will support. I cannot think of a grant for small businesses that a company is not eligible for, but a lot of these other particular entities will not be eligible for some grants. But we've decided this business is a company, it's a proprietary limited company, so we'll just leave that there as a company. Do you export products? Well, what I should tell you about Ipswich Steel Fabricators, their turnover is $6.4 million. They employ 22 people. They've been in business for 10 years. They do some exporting and a bit of importing, and they do some research and development. So they are an interesting little business, very hypothetical. So the question's asked, do they export? We say yes. Do they import? We say yes. Now, number of employees, the system's got these in bands because various grants have got different employee number requirements. And I said this is a 22-person business, so it's obviously in the 20 to 200 band, so we'll just tick that. Do they have an ABN? Well, they do. They're an operating business, but any applicant for a grant will need an ABN in any case. How many years have you been operating? Again, this is in some bands to suit the grant requirements. And we said this business had been going for 10 years, so it's over 3 years. So we just enter that. The next question relates to turnover, and we have the various bands that various grants refer to. And we said this business was 6.4 million, so it's in the category of 1.5 to $20 million. Are you registered for GST? Yes, they're registered for DST. Are you tax exempt? No, they're not. They're a company paying tax or potentially liable to pay tax. They're involved in research and development, and we'll save that now. So the next area we've got to put in is their address. So we'll call it 123 First Street, First Road. Pardon me, Ipswich, Queensland. The code is 4305. And we'll save that. Now what the system's done is identified that based on a postcode of 4305, Ipswich is in a major city of Australia. Obviously it's an outer part of Brisbane. The financial details are listed there again if you want to check them. And we then come to the business industry code. If you know the code number from the Australian Taxation Office, you can insert it. Our system's got to get changed. The Taxation Office a few weeks ago withdrew their business industry code, so we can't click there anymore because they want to encourage everyone to enter a keyword. So we're going to put into the system steel. System will do a search now, and we'll identify the businesses within the tax office codes that have the word steel included. So with this business is a structural steel product manufacturing. I think that fits what they are. Now in actual practice, as the accountants, you would know this code number, so you would just insert that and proceed. This procedure here is really for someone that might be a bit unfamiliar with the clients and what their Australian industry codes are. So we've inserted that information. We can now go to search grants. Now the system's done a search and said there's potentially 16 grants or pending grants that are available for this business. So I'm just going to pick on a couple of these to show you how the system works. I've picked on here accelerating commercialisation. This is a very interesting grant. It's the largest one available to a small business in Australia. Grant of up to $1 million on a 50% basis. The business must have developed a new product, process or service, and they want assistance in commercialising. So this is not for research and development. It's to be phased in at the completion of the research and development phase, although I wonder whether businesses ever really finish research and development. We can have a look at the funding. We're saying it's from 5,000 to $1 million on a 50% basis. Within what we call the application toolkit, we have a link to a ESS BIZTOOLS paper that summarises how this grant operates. So you could read that. When we planned how to set up this site, we didn't really intend that accountants had to become experts in the grants. Hopefully we're the experts. And we just decided as long as we supplied enough information that you could refer to if you needed to. So there's the paper which you can refer to and read, but you could print that for your client if you wish. And then we get to some additional criteria. So if you think that your client might be interested in this, especially after having read the paper, you could, we are then trying to narrow this down. We're going down a flute and we're trying to narrow the whole process down to determine whether your client might be eligible. Has the applicant developed a novel product, process or service? We say yes, they've done that. If the applicant, so an applicant could be an individual for this grant, but under the rules they have to agree that they will become a company before they receive any money. We say, okay, well, we're sure they'll do that. Have they got the ability to complete this project within 2 years, and can they fund 50% of the cost? Now that might be going to come from new capital they're going to introduce, or they're going to try to raise some funds from business angels or other groups of investors. As long as they are able to supply some supporting evidence as to where they're going to get the money, they can proceed with the application. Can the applicant justify the funding that's required? We say yes, because that's what this is all about. And does the applicant have the ownership or control of the intellectual property? So we click yes to that on the basis they do have that. because we've answered all those questions correctly, and bear in mind some of the correct answers for some of the grants could be no to individual questions, you could then apply now. And what we've now brought up is the URL for the government website that handles accelerating commercialisation. We could click on that and have a look at the application if you wish. That takes a little while, so we won't do that. We'll close that out. Now the system's now reduced us back to 15 grants, and if we go into potentially eligible, the system's showing that accelerating commercialisation is one of the potentially eligible grants. There's some apprenticeship grants. One of the other ones the business might be interested in is a business growth grant. This is a very popular grant. It's targeted at specific priority industries. So there's a profile there as to how it operates. And there is a minimum requirement of a turnover of 1.5 million, maximum 100 million. And there's the funding, $500 to $20,000 on a 50% basis. So $40,000 worth of work can be done. This is a great grant for accountants to get involved in a lot of this process, because a fair bit of the work that gets funded under this grant can be done by accountants. Business plans, budgets, cash flow forecasts, debtors of system reviews, human resources, personal property securities register system being established is all work that I've done that's been funded by this grant or its predecessor. We can go to the application toolkit and the same system applies. We can click on and view a paper on how this grant works. And there's in fact two papers on this one. One was on the business grant program and the other one was on the specific advanced manufacturing. Don't be put off by the names of these priority industries, that there's only 9 priority industry classifications. The actual individual types of business operations that fall under those 9 categories is over 400 different types of businesses. I can assure you of that, because we had to go through and identify them all to be placed within the system so that the grants would be identified for you. So there's the paper on how that system operates, so you could view that and say, well, yes, or we think our client could be interested in that. You could then answer some additional criteria. So is the business solvent? We say yes. Has the business been operating under an approved structure for the last 3 years? Now, in this particular grant, a business could go from being a sole trader and has switched to a company, say, a year ago, as long as the trail is consistent. It went from a sole trader to a company, the same person involved as now the shareholder and the director, and the trail goes back for 3 years, they're able to apply. That's a variation on how some other government grants operate, but that's how this one does. Has the business ever received a business growth grant or a tailored enterprise grant? We answer no, they haven't. If we answered yes for that, they would be disqualified, and because you can only get this grant once. And does the business provide high value manufacturing goods and services and could benefit? And we say yes. And again, we could apply now, and there's the URL for that particular grant. We could go to the website if we wanted to. We can come back here now. We've now dropped to 14 potential, and we've got 2 potentially eligible. Now time's marching on, so I am going to finish that process there and show you the report. Obviously, in actual practice, you would continue to go through the pending grants and have a look at them and identify which ones your clients might be eligible for. And sometimes our new subscribers get a great surprise when they realize the range of grants that some of their clients are potentially eligible for. So here's the grant report that you could then produce. for your client, who I've called Ipswich Steel Fabricating. It has your name on it, not ESS BIZTOOLS, it's your name, and the report is dated. The client can see a synopsis of what the grant's all about and the funding details. The disclaimer is basically saying that there's no guarantee that the client's going to be eligible for a particular grant. They've still got to go through the application process. And then we've got the Business Growth Grant on Advanced Manufacturing. There's some details there as to how that applies, what the grant funding is, and the amounts of funding. So that's how ESS BIZGRANTS operates. That's the final report that's then produced. Our recommendation is that each business client should be processed through ESS BIZGRANTS at least once a year. Either it's a great job to be done in June, July each year, so we're at the time of the year where you might say, well, we've got a couple of people who are not fully occupied all day. Who could sit here and start putting the basic details into the system. There's no doubt that you will need someone probably at a more senior level who understands the client to answer some of the questions, but the basic profile could be entered by a team member. And you could then have a conversation with a client. It might be a great way to start some new work under the Business Advisory Services banner by helping your client get the grant and then being successful in undertaking the work. The other use for the system is as you complete the annual accounts and income tax return for the client during the year, that you also take a few minutes. Won't take any more than 3 minutes to enter the profile. And once you've entered it, you can leave it in the system and it's then there for next year. All you've got to do is update a little bit of the information. And then have someone that understands the client a bit more, perhaps the manager, go through and answer some basic questions. So that when you sit down to have that conversation with your client about their financial performance for the year, you are able to very proactively supply this report to the client to have a conversation with them. And then what you can suggest to the client is that you will then proceed with the formulation of the grant application. Now, some of your clients might elect to do that themselves, but in actual practice that doesn't happen very often. After all, the clients don't like filling in forms. That's why a lot of them are coming to you for the tax return in the first place. So filling in forms for a grant application, many of them don't like that, but they like the idea of being able to get the grant funds and use it to improve their business operations. The following year, all you have to do is update the information. And don't assume there's no new grants, because there could have been new grants issued that apply to this particular client. And grants are changing all the time, so our system gets updated throughout the year with the new grants that are issued. So I'm just going to check about questions. Sue's asked me, is the grant paid as a reduction in tax payable or a direct contribution towards the cost? Sue, every grant is treated differently, but in the main, the grant income is taxable income, which you would disclose as income received by the business in their profit and loss account. The only grant that I can think of that goes direct to a calculation on tax payable is the research and development subsidy incentive payment for companies under $20 million turnover. That's 42.5% of their eligible expenditure. That amount is treated as a rebate for income tax purposes, or if the company is trading at a loss and its turnover is under $20 million, the company can have the cash component paid direct into their bank account within 30 days of lodging their tax return. But for all other grants, like the accelerating commercialisation, that is paid to the company in accordance with the cash flow budget that's been submitted by the applicant and accepted by AusIndustry as being the project budget. And the government pays 3 months in advance based on the estimated expenditure. So if it's a project of $400,000, that the client obviously has to submit $200,000, the government's going to put in $200,000, and the expenditure estimate in the first quarter is $50,000. AusIndustry will advance the company $25,000, 50% of the expenditure of $50,000. At the end of the first 3 months, the company has to submit a progress report, and these reports need to be submitted fairly promptly because they're going to have a direct bearing on what the second payment is from the government. Now, if the company hasn't spent all the money that it said it would in the first quarter, the payment that they would otherwise have received for the second quarter will be reduced by the under expenditure. It's the way the government tries to control the process, but in that grant, the government is definitely giving the business some advance money. That doesn't apply in every grant. Export Market Development Grant is a reimbursement of actual expenditures, so the business expends the funds and then can claim up to $150,000 on a 50% basis for Export Market Development Grant, and then receives checks from Austrade for that approved grant amount. I hope that answers what you were looking for. If we go back to the very beginnings of the webinar today, where we went to the beginning of the website, you can view the costs of a subscription to ESS BIZGRANTS. As I indicated in the beginning, you can log on for a 14-day trial at no cost and with no obligation to trial one or two of your clients to see how the system works. You can then receive an annual subscription per office for a fee of $43 per month, excluding GST, or an upfront discounted price of $450 plus GST. That will give an office a license to utilize ESS BIZGRANTS 24/7 for the next 12 months. Any new grants that are issued are inserted into the system, so are readily available to you. Alternatively, you could submit a application to ESS BIZTOOls to subscribe to the ESS BIZTOOls Gold package, which I've now brought up on the screen for you. And the ESS BIZTOOls Gold package includes access to ESS BIZGRANTS as part of the overall subscription package. The other classifications within ESS BIZTOOls do not have access to ESS BIZGRANTS, but a business that wanted to be a silver or bronze subscriber could in fact subscribe to ESS BIZGRANTS separately. So a subscription to the Gold package of ESS BIZTOOls is $261.80 including GST per month, or an upfront discounted price of $2,970 including GST. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar today. I'm just going to check again and see if there's any other questions. Sue said thanks. Thanks, Sue. No one else has asked any questions. If you think of any questions after this webinar, I was going to say over the weekend, but you're probably not going to be thinking of government grants over the weekend. You're probably more interested in how your football team's going. But if you do think of any other questions, please send us an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and we will send you back the details. We have recorded this webinar. We will be sending you an email on Tuesday, which will give you a link to the webinar recording, which will be available for you and any of your colleagues that wish to log on to and have a look. For those of you who are interested in our products, we would welcome further inquiries from you, and we hope that you will all become subscriber members of ESS BIZGRANTS and or ESS BIZTOOLS Gold Package. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for participating. Goodbye.